Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. Today I'm joined by Tucker as usual and Mr. Next Gen himself, the lint rolling owner, Tanner Dykstra, and we are here to do another early PS5 video. This, of course, being about, I would say, arguably the most important launch title for the PS5, also a cross-gen game, and I played it first on PS4, then transitioned to PS5. So some, perspective there. But of course, the game we're talking about is Insomniac Games' Spider-Man Miles Morales. We've all beaten the game.
True.
Yes, sir.
66.67 repeating percent of this panel is in some stage of platinuming the game. I don't know where we stand there.
We can address that right at the top.
Sure.
I talked about this at in our PS5 video, but my game, specifically mine, because Tucker and I play on the same console, but for some reason, my game is just super fucked for some reason. There was a point where I loaded up a save and I could move the camera around, but I couldn't move Miles. I couldn't fast travel. The map was offline. There's also numerous story achievements that I've completed that part of the story, and
Because you've beaten the game.
Because I've beaten the game, and
Yeah.
it just didn't give me the achievement.
Yeah.
It's just the ones for completing that mission. So yeah, hopefully I get those on my new game plus run through because I am going to try and platinum the game. This is my first concerted effort to try and platinum a game, and let me tell you, it's not going well so far.
Yeah, and I'm also going on the work to platinum the game. I'm not having as big of issues with as he is. I do have a couple of trophies that are kind of glitched, and a couple that were easily missable. But I'm going to be working on that a lot more today, and then starting my new game plus run through as I finish up the last few things. But overall, I am very happy with this game. A lot of my personal problems with the experience with the game come from the fact that our console, and I think some issues with the game itself, technically, that this game does have some problems with the camera getting caught on things, or things loading improperly, or character models getting bugged. But overall, looking past those, this is a very, very solid experience. It's a great way to introduce a next generation. You said it's the most important PlayStation launch game, and I would say that transitions pretty easily over to the most important launch game of the generation, because Xbox Series X and S don't really have any major launch games to compete. But I'm super pleased with this, and I'm excited to see how hopefully these smaller titles that are based off of original older ones start coming out more and more. We saw Lost Legacy, we're seeing Miles Morales, and I hope they continue this trend.
Ragnarok
Possibly, yeah. I mean, they're doing a 3-year turnaround time for development, as opposed to the 5 that took to develop God of War 2018. So,
However, here's the deal, right? I think that would be phenomenal. Now, some people be a little bit iffy about that, but I have to say, my big thesis about Miles Morales is that I think that this is a much stronger game than Spider-Man 2018. And I currently have this ranked, not to spoil the end of the year lists, but it's currently my 6th favorite game I've completed in 2020. I really, really enjoyed my time in Miles Morales.
Very nice.
Tanner?
I would have to agree that with Abram that it's I'd say it's it's a tighter experience than Spider-Man 2018, which I appreciated because while I enjoyed my time playing Spider-Man PS4, looking back at it, the story was a little underwhelming. It falls into like the repetitiveness that can get tedious with open world games, collectibles, and things of that nature. So I think condensing this down to an 8-hour experience was very much a strength of it, as well as coming back to the familiar mechanics of Spider-Man PS4 and adding some new things on top of that really enhanced the combat experience. Like I'm thinking of the Venom particularly. Yeah, I think they incorporated the Miles Morales lore pretty well, as well as adding a few nice twists to that. Because I don't think his mother was ever like a politician in any of the
No.
previous material. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I just wasn't crazy about it. Was the whole thing, and of course that could be colored by some of my experiences with the bugs that I'm experiencing. But yes.
So I actually was going through this game and having a good time, but thinking, okay, There's very little way that this surpasses the original Spider-Man for me. That was one of my favorite games of that year. It was my first platinum. It was the first real superhero game that I played. And while this is very, very close to surpassing that, it's not quite there because I do think that the fact that it is a smaller experience leads to me feeling like some elements of the story are a little bit rushed, that the open world feels more empty because there's less things to do, and the fact that it's a reused map made it feel a little less new and shiny. I wish that it had, honestly, I wish it had been condensed to a smaller area to suit the smaller nature of the game. I feel like that would have felt a little bit better. But on the whole, this is a much more interesting package because Insomniac took a lot of creative liberty in the story and the characters, and they're making this their Spider-Man world with original characters and new spins on villains and new connections and all sorts of stuff. And I'm very excited to see where that goes. With the story wrapping up here, I was just like, okay, I can't wait to see what's next. And I think that's a very strong aspect of this game. On top of that, building on top of the foundation that Spider-Man 2018 took, which in my opinion is a very close to perfect video game. It's one of my top 20 favorite video games of all time. But just polishing it in a few certain special ways that give it its own flavor, and I think that is really cool, and it makes both of them able to stand on their own legs. Spider-Man 2018 being a larger experience with a grander story, more villains, which is something this game kind of lacked in with the variety of villains. More mission variety, but this having more creative story and character interactions and that better gameplay with the venom attacks and things like that. So I think that having them both be so unique and special in their own regard is a really cool strength. Like this does not wipe out what the first game did, and the first game's still totally worth playing, especially because the story flows so naturally from one to the other.
Mm.
They do work very nicely together. I think that this game highlights a lot of what I didn't find compelling about 2018 and polishes it up. I actually never finished Spider-Man 2018. I don't have much intention to. But I found it very easy to make my way through this, not only because of its length, but I think because it thinks critically about what the strength of this core experience is, and that is the Spider-Man experience. You're rarely taken out of the suit, and when you are, I think those moments feel important. One of the huge problems I had with 2018 were those boring Mary Jane sections and everything that the game did to take you away
And Miles
from being
sections.
and Miles
True.
sections to take you away from being Spider-Man. This game understands that is why these games are special. It understands it's the web slinging, the combat, everything about that makes these fun, and it doubles down on that. So I just think that it's Insomniac revisiting their past work with a scalpel and taking what works and leaving what doesn't. I still think they bring some stuff that feels like filler. I think that the puzzles should have been cut entirely. One thing I noticed is that as you make a game shorter, filler becomes less and less tolerable in a more constrained experience. So those generator puzzles, fucking open the thing, shoot it to stick the gear in place, stuff like that still didn't feel right to me.
Yeah, and actually, we were actually talking about this as the game was wrapping up. It's like, okay, I don't know how they managed to do it, but they had repetitive mission structure in an even shorter game. And you get, at the end of every mission, it just gets so predictable. Okay, I'm going to hold L1 and square. Something's going to need electricity. Something is depowered or needs to be unpowered. And by the way, this is a spoiler review for anyone who is watching and hasn't beaten the game. Fucking go finish it before you hear the rest of this. But getting to that last playable moment where Miles has fallen out of the building and he and Finn barely survived, and I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. Slow, painful walk up to the thing by holding the stick forward. L1 and square, mash for a while. Oh no, is he gonna make it? Final cutscene. Like, it just got very predictable near the end. And I think that's actually one of my biggest criticisms of this game is the second half of this game loses the story momentum, in my opinion. It becomes pretty predictable. It's like, okay, villain's gonna do this. Like, it just becomes, okay, oh no, the city's gonna blow up. What's gonna happen? Like, it just felt like it lost the charm that the first half of the game had with so many characters interacting and new story points. And it was a little bit of a letdown for me. And especially as I was starting to feel that repetitive mission structure, I started feeling the weight of the game being shorter, but still managing to fit that repetitiveness.
I'd have to agree. If we're talking strictly about the story, I think you're right. especially Miles and Finn's antagonistic relationship. I think we both pegged that she was the Tinkerer before that reveal even happened, even though it happened early on in the story, just because it's sort of a predictable story structure. Um, I thought we also talked about how like their antagonistic relationship is like a metaphor sort of for an actual like romantic relationship. There's lines in there that make that pretty bla- glaringly apparent.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think
Why don't we use our
what
words? Why don't you stop being so clingy? God,
the exact
God damn it.
why would you let me get close to you? Yeah. But what aspect? Because I agree that the very end of the game was sort of it was saccharine, earnest, and predictable. But one aspect that I did like was how there was the crowd of people that approached Miles after he's fallen back to New York, and there's a group of people that see him, and they obviously them knowing his secret identity is a big deal, but they don't reveal that for obvious reasons because they say he's our Spider-Man. I think that aspect of the game, the fact that Miles is like he's the Spider-Man of this specific neighborhood, and obviously there's racial community overtones in that as well. I think that's a very strong message, and if that had been played into more, like they tried to do with the app, like the friendly neighborhood app missions, which I just did not get that same feel that I wish I had gotten.
Yeah.
I don't care about the story.
Okay, fair enough.
Frankly, I think that this is a gameplay experience.
Mhm.
And that's where a lot of my compulsion comes from. At the same time, I do feel that Miles and his circle should be the stars, whatever Insomniac does next, because I think that they're fresh in a way that Peter and his characters aren't. Not
Yeah.
because they're bad, but because they're played out. So I liked seeing Genki, I like seeing Uncle
Mhm.
Aaron and Rio, and the way that everyone interacts. And I think seeing Miles come into his own was really great. But I didn't expect anything other than a pretty simple narrative, and I
Yeah.
think that it still had enough engaging plot points to thread me along through it.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it facilitated really great gameplay moments. That the last battle for Harlem, I think, is phenomenal. The scale of it, as you're fighting on the streets to the roofs, and then up to the Tinkerer. One thing I really appreciated was the way that the game doesn't break its own gameplay conventions to give you something wacky. A great example, I love Uncharted 4, fucking sword fight to end the game. You've never had a sword fight before. Why is that in there? This game is really great about giving you a powerful moveset and keeping it consistent throughout the experience and letting you grow into it. So by the
Yeah.
end of the game, I was really feeling the Venom powers, the camouflage, my gadgets, and then when I got to fight the Tinkerer and keep those skills through that fight, I thought that was great. So the last hour of the game I found to be incredibly engaging, actually.
No,
You mean like kind of
Abram.
like the last mission, which continues on until the
Yeah,
end?
yeah. I really actually thought it was successful.
Okay. I want to put a pin in something you said and come back to it in just a second. I think that probably first of all that is because like they sell it on the fact that you are Spider-Man. It feels like you're Spider-Man. So when you're sort of shoved into this
They
linear
said it. Damn
story
it.
and this narrative, it doesn't really it doesn't feel like your Spider-Man experience. It feels like the Spider-Man experience they're making for you. Whereas the open world gameplay feels like your Spider-Man
Sure.
experience. But the pin that I'm going to pull out right now is: did you ever use like the gravity well, or did you find yourself using
Holodrone.
the hollow drum?
Yeah.
I forgot that the holograms were a thing, quite honestly.
Yeah,
Oh,
those two are just not useful in combat, to be 100% honest.
Oh, see, I completely disagree, especially when you're being grouped up on by a bunch of guys. They're great for crowd control. And
Hmm.
and I also tend to play those games taking my distance a little bit more and picking people off, taking them away from the group. So using the gravity well and the holodrones to fucking cast people one direction, then be pulling web spinning and throwing them. I actually found it really compelling. I think that the combat is the strongest aspect of this game, and the way that
Hmm.
it takes the gadgets and interfaces that with Miles's particular components makes Peter's gameplay feel a little more static. Because
Hmm.
one issue I always had with Spider-Man 2018 is that it just ripped off Arkham. This
Yeah.
still rips off Arkham, but it gives it enough of its own spin that I think it's compelling in a unique way.
To be fair, lots of games rip off Arkham nowadays.
Yeah, but if you're gonna do a superhero game
Yeah.
and the combat is exactly the same, it's more noticeable.
Okay.
This felt like it was finally Insomniac putting their own finishing touch on it that the last game I don't think had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I do
What?
think that that is going to continue on until we eventually do get to play as Peter again. I think there's no way that they don't give him his own next ability that not necessarily like an inherent ability, but just some sort of upgrade to his suit or something that gives him his own flavor. Because looking back, yeah, his gameplay was pretty basic. Of course, it was fantastic for the time, and I'm not criticizing that game for not having what this game has. But it's clear that this is the way to go with introducing that next level of gameplay mechanic, especially of how well that was integrated into the moveset. The just holding down L1 and that changes everything you can do. It happens so naturally, and especially because I liked how they introduced new mechanics. Tanner and I were talking about this. Is Miles learns his new abilities through stressful situations, almost like mutants in the X-Men movies.
Mhm.
Something crazy is happening to him, and he doesn't just like magically find out he can do this. His body is reacting to something crazy happening to him, and he's boom uses the gigantic venom thing, which by the way didn't use that a second time. I wish I had. Or the camouflage, or even the venom in the first thing. He's protecting Peter, and I think those are woven so naturally into the story that doesn't feel like, okay, I'm getting a new upgrade. More that Miles is coming into his own, and the puberty metaphor is there because he's growing and he's learning who he is at his body and as Spider-Man. I think that was really cool because we didn't get that with the original Peter. We've gotten all sorts of Spider-Man origin stories, and they skipped over that, thankfully, in the 1st
Mhm.
game. But we got to have an origin story here, so you get to boast the best of both worlds with these two games, and I think that's a really cool dynamic.
Yeah. I also just want to shout out very quickly because this has certainly been covered in literally every review or analysis of this game is how differently Miles moves. Like he obviously he's still learning to be Spider-Man, so when he lands on something, sometimes his arms are kind of windmill a little bit, or when he's he's lankier, so he'll spin around more in the air, and he's more flowy when he's swinging through the city. I think all of that is perfectly a nice balance of noticeable and also just feels natural once you get into it.
Yeah, Insomniac is just really talented for game feel.
Hmm.
I think it's really excellent the way that it feels cinematic without taking out of the gameplay experience. It's a nice middle ground. Like when you pull off those finishers and they're just out of control to the
Yeah.
finisher back to control of the player. That's so excellent. When it'll transition from a narrative sequence to grab R2 to swing.
Mhm.
These things are just so well done. At the same time, I think this game's weakest aspect is its open world.
Hmm.
And I just think that, especially in comparison to what the rest of the Sony Studios umbrella does, this feels very gamey. And I see the appeal of that, but I want a superhero Spider-Man game that puts Miles or Peter in the context of a world that isn't, here's a bunch of little points of interest that are all color-coded, and you're going to go here, do the thing, get the thing, leave. I just think that there's a disconnect here between how well the game tells its story and how it evokes this feeling of superheroism and the way it goes in and out of gameplay to narrative with this world that feels very much 7th gen, that I don't think has evolved the way that Sony Santa Monica and Sucker Punch and Naughty Dog are pushing open worlds. The game, the combat, the traversal, here in Spider-Man is so good. I just want that world to hit that same level of quality and immersion.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I guess that I haven't played a lot of newer Sony open world games, but I guess that it's pretty elementary, pretty paint by numbers in terms of like collectibles, points of interest, all that sort of stuff in the open worlds. And I think you're right. I'm excited to play a game that maybe challenges those conventions a little bit more, and I just haven't.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to spin this off into something. I was liking how you're talking about the story and that feeling a little bit disconnected from the open world, which, as I said a little bit earlier, my criticism of this feeling a little bit too large of scale because they did scale back on some of the content available in the world. It didn't feel as rich as the first one, but I think the game's strongest suit in almost every aspect, from the animations like Tanner was talking about to the story and everything flowing so well together, is this game, as I said, flow. The flow is the name of the game here. The Venom flows naturally into the rest of the combat. It feels supernatural as you upgrade it and unlock those abilities. The side content is woven so naturally into the main story. You have that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app. You just swipe to the left, brings it up. It's not a huge HUD. It's really simple. It's integrated into the story well. It connects you to the characters, and they you get little calls from people. It feels like they're teasing you along with the story and the side content in a really natural and organic way. And I think that was the thing I noticed first about this game, is that it's not, and I said this in our first impressions card in the corner, but you might not need to see it if you're watching this review, that in lots of other open world games, you finish the story beat that you're working on, and then you get, okay, there's an explosion over there. You should go over there and finish that, but you don't have to. Like, there's probably people dying over there if you're going around and jerking off Koroks or whatever, but you can go do other stuff. And this game, there isn't those big moments, because everything is, there's a nice flow between the high octane moments and then down back to the quieter moments. And you feel like, okay, I can go help the neighborhood. I can go get some collectibles and help Miles figure out his connections with his friends and family. And I think that really made me want to do the side content a lot more than a lot of other open world games.
So I agree with you in a lot of respects. The one thing that I will say that did mess up that flow a little bit for me is when you can very blatantly feel when Spider-Man's like, hey, you know what? I got to make this phone call to talk to Finn. But you know what? Let's make that phone call later. I bet I have time to go do something in the open world. And that happens a little bit too much. And so I wish that you always had that option to progress forward. I think what you're saying is really salient in the way that it weaves all this content together. And it does flow so well, and that side content is really great. But I just wish that there weren't these pretty constant moments where they're like, hey, you know what? Remember you got that app, let's go do something on that app. But otherwise, I do agree in a lot of respects.
Okay. What other kinds of aspects of the game do we need to talk about, Tanner?
One thing I was just gonna bring up, because you brought up the side missions, I wish they hadn't done Kingpin again. There's so many Spider-Man villains. Pick literally any other criminal that would logically be setting up a crime network. Just don't do Kingpin again. Because literally, I watched Tucker finish that side mission before I finished it. I'm like, I was like, Tucker, who do you think the mystery villain is? He's like, oh, I don't know. And then I said, I just really hope it's not Kingpin again, because I feel like that's kind of the mood I'm getting, and I hope I'm wrong. And then 30 seconds after I said that was when Kingpin pops up on the screen. I'm like, well, god damn it. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and I think that ties into another complaint that I said I had with the game, is the fact that it does feel a little bit lacking in diversity of villains. You get very few boss fights in this game, and
you get Hologram Vulture.
That's true. That was fun. I liked that mission. But you have Rhino twice. You have Tinker a couple of times, but a couple of times not really. One of them a chase fight, and you get one Prowler fight. And the fact that it's really just those villains and not even any ones that you can really go and fight in side missions. So there's no really secret hidden mini boss or stuff like that. I feel like it tones it down in a way that makes this game feel like it's less ingrained in the world, because it was so much fun to see all the variety of boss fights that they did in the first game, and have all those characters not necessarily being fleshed out. It was just that bombastic action-packed adventure Spider-Man deal that I felt really connected with the flow of the game. Like you were saying, it is a little more gamey, it's a little more comic booky, and they leaned back out of that for this game. But I do think that that's one of the strongest aspects of this series, and I hope that they tune back into that for the future, because there are some things that they're setting up, and as long as they notch those up to 11, I think that they really have something cool going on, especially because the future will be a little more creative, because they've sort of finished that default Spider-Man story we got in the first one, and they're taking it in their own direction now.
This is Batman Year One. This is what the story and scope reminded me of here in Miles Morales. I think you're totally right, but for me, I thought that narrowing that focus fits within what this game is doing. It's about Miles's come up. You know, there's even certain points in the narrative as it stands where, like, you know what, Peter, like, maybe you should be.
Oh.
Damn. He got to cut out. It's not us.
And I think if you start throwing...
You just cut out. Sorry.
Ooh, he's back.
No, that was you. That was you.
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
Oh, am I back now?
Yes.
Yes.
When did I leave? When did I leave?
Restart
you
the
said,
whole point.
You said after you said, I wish Peter was here.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, I mean, there were places in the story I'm like, yeah, you know what, Peter probably should be here. Like, should Miles be handling this alone? And I think if you started putting too many more cooks in the kitchen in terms of the Rogues Galley, maybe take it to Hell's Kitchen, a little bit of fucking wordplay for you
Ooh.
folks. You know what I'm saying? That would have, I think, not fit what this game was going for. But I will say that the larger moments like those Rhino set pieces when you're fucking pulling on him like you're fucking Ratatouille to get him to go through the mall and everything, I think paints a really compelling picture for where this series can get with its set pieces in the future. So I think I get where you're coming from, but for me, I don't think that's to the detriment of Miles as much as it is to my excitement to see a confident Miles through the start of a game, a Miles who can take on all of those other people like William Dafoe.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
I was gonna. Do we want to talk about the potential next game quickly?
Well, I think you should unmute
Tucker.
your mic before you keep
Yeah,
talking.
Tucker should probably.
Yeah. So I think we should just keep this to the review
Okay.
of the game itself. We'll discuss that in
That's
another discussion. But we have 5 minutes left in the Zoom meeting. And I think that's kind of a perfect finish up.
I
Unless
do want to say in that case then Venom Goblin question mark, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that would be cool. But all in all, I am very positive on this game. I'm going to reserve full judgments for once I've replayed the story, hopefully with less glitches and
Yeah.
problems in the technical department. Same with Tanner that way.
Yes.
And because I also platinumed the first game and I want to give both these games on equal playing field. But I'm very comfortable and confident in the fact that I don't necessarily think either game super outshadows one another. I think they each have their own strength, and having two games that stand so strongly side by side for different reasons is super impressive. And it gives me a lot of hope for the story and the gameplay of whatever they continue this series with. We're hoping Spider-Man 2, you get the interactions of both of them, switching between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
You upgrade their combat, their relationship together. You expand the story, more creativity, hopefully a new environment for them to explore, so it doesn't really feel like you're retreading that ground. And there's just so much potential that they've shown. This isn't just the default Spider-Man story, default Spider-Man mechanics anymore. They're giving their own twist to it, and it's that creativity we're getting from Insomniac that makes me so pumped for whatever they go next for this.
Yeah.
My biggest praise I can give the game is that, unlike you, I find Spider-Man 2018 to be a really middling open world action game that didn't compel me in a particularly strong way, even though I see what that game does so well. By contrast, the fact that they were able to get me with Miles and hook me the way that they did has me really excited for the fact that hopefully with the next Spider-Man game, I can connect to it as robustly as you did. I think that this was, for my taste, an excellent improvement. So I'm excited to see whatever Insomniac does next.
Yeah. I just basically have to pair those two things as well. You know, in comparison, Spider-Man 2018 is a bit of a basic experience. This is a step up in terms of mechanics and everything of that nature. I really hope that the next step will really blow me away. But in general, just typically about this game, the 8-hour experience was nice for like my first next gen experience, my first platinum I'm going to attempt. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed my time playing this game, beating dudes up, being Miles Morales.
And there we have it. You muted your mic again, you motherfucker. Stop sneezing.
God damn it. But what I wanted to say, just a final point, is it's fun to be Miles. Miles is a very interesting character in this game. He has such a fun personality. I'm really happy to see a new superhero get this kind of focus and development. And we have a great movie for him. We have a great video game for him. Hopefully we get that next movie adaptation with live action or with more Spider-Verse stuff. There's just so much potential in getting finally that new superhero that's getting the attention that one deserves. And it's just, I have so much hope going into the future. And you know, this was a great game. It's up there in my favorites. It's certainly one of my favorites this year. And I'm really excited to see how this sort of pans out in the pantheon of the PS5's history. It's a big launch game, but will it stack up to the things that Insomniac puts out, that Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch and Sony Santa Monica and all those teams are working on? I'm wondering if it'll be overshadowed, but at the moment, it's so strong on its own that it has the potential to stand up to whatever the legacy of the PS5 has.
I mean, it's no Ghost of Tsushima or Last of Us Part 2, but it's a pretty good game.
But on that note, thank you very much for watching this with us, guys. I'm happy to do this review. I'm excited for the future, and we have plenty of other PS5 coverage coming eventually. So
Yeah.
see you guys later.
Flip, flip.
We're starting a new podcast, Tanner.
No,
What's that?
don't stop. Don't indulge him.
I'm
called-
going to indulge.
It's called the Klonoa Cast. We're going to talk about.
He doesn't
the
even know what that
Klonoas.
means.
What's a Klonoa?
Exactly.
Klonoa
Is that as similar to a
platform.
cloaca?
Cloaca is your butthole.
They're very different, actually.